My name is Ron Carrico. I'm with the San Diego Air and Space Museum, and today we're interviewing Vic Vizcarra, and he is a retired Air Force colonel and flew fighters, and he's going to tell us about some of his experience. And pretty soon we're going to show a video of a particular mission that happened in the early days of Vietnam. So let's start off. Where were you born?
Los Angeles.
What year?
1936.
Oh, you're a young guy. And so what did your parents do?
They migrated from Mexico to the United States and opened up a Mexican restaurant in 1942, before Mexican restaurants were popular. And they estimated that they had to sell $50 worth of meals to break even. The first day that they were open, they sold $150 worth of meals and closed early because they ran out of food. So they operated a very successful Mexican restaurant for 20 years.
Went into the Air Force. Where did you go to school?
Pilot training or school?
High school or college.
Oh, okay. I was born and raised in LA, so I went to high school at Mount Carmel High School, all-boy Catholic school in LA proper. It closed. I graduated from there in 1955. The school closed and graduated. I went to Loyola University out in Westchester and took mechanical engineering, got a degree in mechanical engineering.
So where did you get your commission?
Through ROTC at Loyola.
So you actually started off in pilot training. Your first active duty was in pilot training. Where was that?
This is in the old days when primary was separate from basic, and primaries were all civilian-run, operated schools. So I went through Spence, Moultrie, Georgia, flew T-34s and T-37s, and it was a 6-month assignment there. Graduated from there, went to Reese Air Force Base.
T-37s? What year would that be?
1960. The last went to Reese Air Force Base at Lubbock, Texas for basic, and through the T-33.
I never really thought about how old the T-37 was. I mean, it was, because I flew it, and they flew it for a hell of a long time.
Oh yeah, right. It was a fun airplane to fly.
I didn't like it at all.
Oh, you didn't? The little 3D bird?
Well, I hadn't flown anything before. You just, I went to pilot training and I'd never flown anything before.
Well, I remember I did not care for basic training at all because I was so stressed out about making sure I graduated. I didn't want to get washed out, And luckily I was a strong student, so in fact I finished high enough in the class that I was able to pick fighters, which is what I wanted.
Right, yeah.
But, so in basic training, flying the T-33, I hated it. Well, then I did a 3-year tour assignment at Edwards Air Force Base where I flew the T-33. I flew it as a Stand-Up Val guy, FCF guy, and an IP, and I got to love that airplane. And now I thought to myself, why the difference? And then light came out. Shoot, there was no stress of being a student, So it made a big difference.
Yeah.
I was going to pilot training in basic. The IPs started asking, well, what do you want out of here? And I said, fighters. And the guy says, He says, you're going to be gone an awful lot. And I says, I'll pay the price. And,
well,
not realizing how often you were gone, But at the time, you just don't realize. All these TDYs. Well, see, I consider myself very fortunate that as a young kid, 6 years old, I knew what I wanted to do, and I never changed. I remember my dad saying, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" I says, "I want to be a pilot. I want to fly." No. He says, "No, what do you really want to do?" "Dad, that's what I really want to do." Because I was the baby of the family, and I had a 15-year older brother who flew P-47 Thunderbolts in World War II.
By the way, if you would have been here Friday, you would have met one.
Right.
Because I came upstairs, and there was an old guy standing out here with one of the other docents, and he said, I brought this guy up here to meet you, see if you could interview him, and he was a Thunderbolt pilot.
No kidding.
94 years old.
Oh yeah, well, as a little kid, my dad would tell me, he says, you got another brother. Well, where is he? Oh, he's over fighting the bad guys. Well, how's he fighting them? He flies an airplane. Man, that intrigued me. Man, without, and the thing is, I was so young, I didn't remember him because he had gone off to the war already. I vaguely remembered him, but I didn't feel like I knew him.
Yeah.
But man, right then, when my dad said he's flying airplanes and fighting these guys with airplanes, I thought, oh, I'd be just like him. So I was very fortunate that I was able to achieve my dream.
I never.
Like I say, so I've always had that goal to do that, and I not only want to be a pilot, I want to be a fighter pilot, you know. And I'll tell you, 2 major times in my life, I thought I was not going to be able to achieve my dream. In college, because of the close-up reading, all of a sudden I noticed that when I look up, things would be blurry far away, you know.
Yeah.
So I went to a optometrist on my own, and I told the optometrist what my goal was, and I was concerned about my eyesight. So he checked, and he says, well, he says, yeah, he says, your eyes are getting weak because of all this close-up reading.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
But I'll tell you what, he says, I'm going to give you some reading glasses and some eye exercises. And he gave me some eye exercises that I think is what really saved me. And sure enough, when I went to my final medical before graduating, I still had 20/20, which was fine, you know. But that was the first time I thought, ooh, I'm not going to achieve my dream. Second time was 6 weeks before graduating from pilot training, the potential assignments came down, and there were only, I forget the number, but I figured in my class position that at best I might luck out and get a T-33 going back as an instructor, not a fighter, you know.
Right.
Well, that was 6 weeks before graduating. When the final list came out, I'd moved up high enough in class that I was able to get the third of 6 F-100 assignments.
Oh, wow.
So I lucked out there, but man, I was sweating bullets that I wasn't going to be able to achieve my
I
dream.
figured T-33 for a while, and then after that, you go to F-100s.
100s.
And where'd you train on those?
At Luke, 6 months at Luke for initial checkout.
So that'd be 62 or so?
61. And then graduated from Luke.
So flying A models there, or?
C's.
C's, okay.
C's. And then when you graduate from there, then you go up to Nellis for 3 months to get your mid-air refueling, shoot on a dart, and do tactical attack. And then you graduate. So I graduated, I finished my F-100 checkout training in April of '62, and then reported to Homestead Air Force Base, 31st TAC Fighter Wing, 309th TAC Fighter Squadron.
Is that about the time Joe Engle was there?
Joe Engle, the altar to Joe Engle was still there. He'd already left, but I'll tell you, he was so highly thought of. Everybody just talked about him all the time.
Yeah, such a nice guy.
Yeah, he's.
I'll tell you another story. You've never heard this one. I'm telling you stories. I shouldn't. That's the way it's supposed to work. I interviewed him right over there about 4 or 5 years ago.
Really? Yeah, but his name was still floating around there. He was in the 309th Fighter Squadron there at Homestead.
Yeah.
And he'd already left to go to the school and all that.
Yeah. So anyway, so you go to Homestead. Now, where did the F-105 come into the deal?
Okay. Well, let me back up a little bit.
Okay.
At Homestead, I did one rotation deployment. The TAC would go 3 months at a time to different locations.
Interlick and all that.
Exactly. So ours was a 3-month rotation to Kadena, who was converting from 100s to 105s. So we went over there to hold the nuclear fort down for them while all their pilots were at Nellis checking out. Well, that 3-month deployment turned out to be 6 months, because within about a week of getting ready to come back, redeploy to the States, is when the Cuban Missile Crisis broke out. So anyway, so then came back. So then in August of '63, I got my 105 assignment, went through Nellis, the short course, 30-hour short course, and then went over to Itazuki, Japan, in the 105, and was only there about 5 months, and then they moved the wing up to Yokota. So I was up by Yokota. It was a 3-year tour, but I reported there New Year's Eve, 1963. Well, I had kids at the time, so when it came time to rotate back, I needed to get back on a summer cycle. I didn't want to take them out of school mid-term, you know.
Oh, I get it, yeah.
So I volunteered. I asked for a 6-month extension, so I did 3.5 years in Japan in the THUD. And while I was there, they would send me down to the war 2 months at a time. So I did 3 TDY tours to the war in the THUD.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And in those 3 tours, I ended up getting 59 missions. Well, you needed 100 for a combat tour. So when it came time to deroast back to the States, I thought for sure they would send me down there to finish up, but they didn't, because they didn't like guys that had more than 50 missions, because they were down there, and like I would only needed 41 missions. I would have been down there, I would have got those 41 missions in maximum 2 months. They wanted somebody they could keep for a while. So instead they sent me back to the States. So I went back to the States without a combat tour. So after I'd been there a while, I told the wife, I said, "You're not gonna like this." I said, "But I feel like I need to volunteer, go back and finish up and get a combat tour." And sure enough, she didn't like that idea. So she, smart gal, I married not only beauty, but brains. So she said, "Instead of volunteering, why don't you sign up for your master's program? They'll give us a little bit more home time. And then once you get your master's, volunteer, go back." So that's what I did. So in '70, I finished my master's program seminar at Edwards there, and volunteered to go back. And I thought for sure they'd send me back in the third, because that was my high time airplane, already had 59 missions on it. And instead, they sent me in 100s. So I went back and did a 100 combat tour at Phang Rang. And the good news about that was that I went there thinking I was going to have a year tour there. And when I gave them my records, they looked at my records and said, "Oh, you already got 179 days in country." He says, "You got credit for the 59 missions I flew."
Right.
At the time, the 179 days, they gave me credit for that. So I only ended up doing 7 months over there.
So then you didn't have to fly in the north.
No, yeah. So, but I saw the war in both locations. 59 missions up over the north and 120 over the south. And I'll tell you what, it was like night and day. Big difference.
What do you mean?
The adrenaline was pumping all the time when you're up over the north. South Vietnam was just a piece of cake. I mean, it was like being on a big tactical range.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In fact, to show you the difference is, I remember flying a mission with one guy in South Vietnam. We went there, and I never would go and review my gun camera film because I never saw anything exciting, you know. Well, this one day after the mission, and I get a call from the camera shop, says, "Hey, Major Vizcarra, you might want to come down and check your gun camera film." "Why?" I said, "Come down and look at it." So, okay. So I went down and looked at it, and sure enough, and I'd missed it in real life, but the gun camera film, you can see 37 millimeters going across my nose.
Oh, wow.
And see, they didn't have that many 37 millimeter guns in South Vietnam, but we were bombing way up north near the DMZ.
Right.
And so I said, well, and then it made me realize, because it was a two-ship. I was leading this wingman and I, and we had a FAC, and he marked the spot, and he wanted us to do a road cut along a ridge. It was going to be a good choke point. Well, I went in there, and my bombs were right on the road. My wingman went in there, right next to my bombs. Man, that FAC got so excited. He said, "Man," he says, "you guys are good." He says, "What outfit are you guys from? Gotta send some kudos back to you." Yeah, so we said, "Send it to the 35th Attack Fighter Wing." And he says, "What dive angle were you guys using?" We said, 30 degrees. He says, "Man," he says, "that's gutsy." Well, we never thought there was a threat there, you know. So then when I saw the camera film, I thought, "Oh shit, maybe I should have been using 45 degrees instead."
So compare the 100 to the 105.
105 by far. It's not a fair comparison, because the 105 came back. It was designed, several years after the 100. What I liked about the 100, it was a difficult airplane to fly correctly. So once you master it, I felt like it helped make you a good pilot. The 105 was such a beauty. I mean, it was a Cadillac of the year. I mean, huge, comfortable cockpit, very advanced for its day. I had all the confidence in the world. You probably are aware that the 105 was designed as a high-speed, low-altitude tactical nuke delivery platform, and it didn't have terrain following, but it had terrain avoidance radar, which means you had to manually fly it.
Okay.
It wasn't automatic.
Sure.
But to give example how advanced the airplane was and how good it was, is I had confidence that I'd be able to do the mission of delivering a nuke in weather with that airplane. So one day I'm up on a check ride, a standard valve check ride, and I'm in the back seat of the 105 with a bag on there. Made the takeoff under the bag. It was a high-low high. You know, went up there, and climbed up to altitude, got to the down point, let down all under the bag, leveled off, and I remember I had the clearance plane set for a 500-foot low level. So I'm flying along, and pretty soon the standard valve guy in the front says, "Hey Vic," says, "why don't you come out from under his bag and just take a breather?" Oh, okay, great. Well, what it was, he wanted me to see where I was. So I pulled it back, and there I was in this narrow little valley with the mountain ridges on each side. And I did it all under the bag, on radar, with that airplane, which proved to me that, yeah, I'd be able to do the mission in the real weather.
Yeah, you know, I was talking about that C-130 book. The first time I ever heard the term speed of heat was an F-4 guy talking about getting the hell out of East Germany. And I think it probably even applied even more to the to the 105.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I thought, C-130, well, what they were talking about is they didn't want to fly high at all. They wanted to fly everything at, 250 to 280 knots at 100, 125, 130 feet,
Yeah.
or less,
Yeah.
And all this is at night.
Wow.
But they have GPS.
Oh.
Big difference.
Sure, yeah, with GPS, yeah.
When I was in the 130 when we got, and I
Yeah.
thought, yeah, but it's different at night. And I thought, oh yeah, well the GPS,
You probably remember I think the name was the Four Horsemen, that air demonstration C-130 team, four ships.
We had one of those guys in the squadron.
Did you? Yeah, I saw him actually.
Major Weeks was his name. He was one of the guys. Yeah,
yeah, I saw him when I was going through pilot training at Spence.
Right.
For a air show, drove up to Turner Air Force Base, and they were there. It was an impressive show to see 4 C-130s doing, formation aircraft.
What do you think? So, now you flew the F-4 after you must have. So what year did you check on the F-4?
F-4 was the last thing I flew. After my 100 tour at Fang Rang, surprisingly, I got back into Feds. They sent me back to McConnell as an instructor in 105s. So I was an instructor in 105s for about 15 months, and then that's when the Air Force deactivated the 105s, gave them multiple guard. So when that happened, most of us were sweating what kind of assignments we were going to get out of here because the 105 career was ending, and Air Force took care of us. Gave us great. Seven of us from that squadron ended up at Willie flying F5s, instructing F5s. So I instructed in F5s for 3 years. That was.
Oh man.
Yeah, next to the 105, the F5 was my next favorite airplane. It was a miniature 105. It was a little hot rod, and I start off in the original A's, the A, and then we got the E's. And I'll tell you what, it should have been redesignated something else because it was bigger. It looked like a A, but it was a bigger airplane, so much hotter, so much more capability. Just a neat airplane.
Wow. Yeah.
So I instructed in it for 3 years. Had all kinds of students.
So so that's when they were training the Vietnamese students to fly, and Cambodians and all that.
We trained South Koreans, Brazilians, Saudis, even had some, I was going to say Iranian, but no, the Iranian was when I was in primary training. But we had, Swiss. Now, those guys were sharp. They came over to, when the Swiss government was considering purchasing the F-5, they bought, I forget how many pilots to go through as check out, as students, but also to evaluate the airplane. Man, those guys were typical Swiss.
So what inch is that?
805, something like that.
But more thrust though.
Oh yeah.
Huh. Did they have different avionics?
It had a functioning radar. I mean, a real radar. So, max scope was 40 miles. It had a 40-mile scope and a 13-mile scope. It had maneuvering flaps that were controlled by the computer.
Oh, wow.
Which made it a very interesting aspect. I don't know if you ever heard of this, but what happened was, with the A model, what was good about the F-5A, which was designed specifically for foreign military sales, for third world countries by Northrop.
Did it have guns and stuff?
It had 2 guns.
Okay.
I don't know. Okay. It was a very easy, simple, forgiving airplane to fly, and it was called spin resistant. It would spin, but it would be extremely hard to get into a spin. So it's a spin resistant airplane. Well, we get the new F-5Es, and we're out there flying them just like we flew the A's. Well, next thing you know, we lose our first one. We were on an air training command base, so there were tactical air command detachment there. And so the air training command did the major, we had our own maintenance, but they would do all the major maintenance, phase, stuff like that, and do the FCS on it. Well, this ATC guy ends up jumping out of a new E, and when we asked him what happened, he says, I got in a spin. And everybody says, you can't, the airplane doesn't spin. He says, I got in a spin. So they went out to check the wreckage, and sure enough, man, when he hit, it meant it just moved 6 inches, so you could tell that it was coming out of
Yeah, right.
And
How did he do it?
well, what happened is, like I said, we thought you could fly the airplane the same way as an A. Well, what it was is with the computer and maneuvering flaps, what happened is if you could get yourself in a situation where if you were doing a roll, and as the flaps came down, the computer thinks you need flaps, or like that, the flaps, it would cause this phenomenon, which was called the inverted pitch hang-up. It would force the nose up at that, and then slice and get in a spin and go down there. So that's what happened to him, you know. Here's a story for you on that one. So our General Jim McInerney, you were him? He used to be a consultant on Fox News a lot. He stepped on the last time he was on there and got fired. But anyway, I knew him as a colonel, and he was our director of operations over at Luke. We belonged to Luke across town, but we were physically located at Willie. And he was the DO of the 104s at Luke, which was a German squadron for training the Germans at the 104, and us, the F-5s. Well, being over there, logically, he checked out and flew the 104, left us alone, everything's fine. Well, then within a month's period, we lost 3 F-5s, the new one. And he's at the action board, and all of a sudden he realizes how little he knows about the airplanes. So he calls up their squadron commander and says, I need a quick checkout in the F-5. And okay, so he assigned me as his instructor. It was so high priority, it was a Saturday. Nobody's flying except old Colonel McInerney and myself.
Oh, yeah.
So he comes over, so I gave him a B ride, which is totally different than the E. The B flew like an A. So I checked him out. But anyway, there I am, a major, he's a colonel, and he says, hey, Vic, he says, I want to experience this inverted pitch hang-up. And I said, Colonel, that's not a good idea. and he goes, no, he says, I've been talking to Hank Chodo, who was the chief test pilot from Northrop. He says it's a controllable maneuver, and that to correct this problem that we're having, that we ought to include in the syllabus with the students. And I says, Colonel, I says, I can tell you right now, to the man in this squadron, none of them will agree with that. I said, well, then how do you expect, where's your solution to this problem? I said, do it the way we've been doing them. He says, we take them at about 80-degree angle, let their airspeed run out, show them how the airplane just recovers by itself, swings out, and it recovers. Oh, well, I want to see that too. So I'm in the back seat of this B, and he's in the front seat. And he says, okay, he says, I'm going to take it up to 80 degrees. So he takes it up. And I look out, and man, that drop tank is perpendicular to the horizon. He's perfectly 90 degrees instead of 80. So sure enough, he runs out of airspeed and falls over backwards. And he goes, are we okay? And like a jerk, I go, I think so. So anyway, he goes down there, and he's swinging around like that. And he says, well, he says, man, that is kind of hairy. And he says, but I still want to see a inverted pitch hang up. I should be in the IP. I was in command of the flight, but he's being a colonel. I should have insisted, say, sir, we can't do that. It's not in the syllabus. But he's a colonel. I said, okay. So we go up there, and now he's a knee. He's going to fly along. And he said, I'm going to do that inverted pitch hang up now. So I gave him room. I go up there. He pulls up, rolls over, nose comes down, he rolls out and he recovers. He says, hey, he says, that's nothing. He says, just like that in your regular airplane. I said, sir, because you didn't experience inverted pitch hang-up. He says, well, how do I do that? And I said, just give it a couple nose clicks, nose down trim on the trim button. Okay. He rolls over, and man, that old nose comes up, the gas, the stream out of the airplane. It looked like an airplane in Vietnam had gotten a hit, you know. Goes up, and he slides, gets inverted, and now he's in a spin. You know, now I'm back there, you know, my career is flashing in front of my eyes thinking I'm cooked. And I go, get your flaps up, because the flaps is what would cause this. I said, get your flaps up, get your flaps up. And my next call is going to be eject, because by now I could see, and he's inverted, he's passing through 10,000 feet. I was just about to say eject, when all of a sudden I see the nose drop down, it rolls out, and he recovers. We came back, and I followed him back in. He lands, I went around, came back, and landed. So I landed after him. He meets me at the airplane on my ladder, right? I've shut down, I haven't even out there, and he's on my ladder. He says, Vic, what the hell was that? I says, let's go in there and debrief it. So we went in there, and I told him, says, you want to see inverted pitch hang-up? That's what you experience. I says, and you see why I'm telling you, there's not an instructor here that would go along with Hank Chodo's recommendation that you put it in the syllabus. He goes, this is dangerous. This airplane's dangerous. I'm going to send TAC a message that they need to be grounded. Oh, geez. I survived that little incident, but now I'm going to lose my career through that. So I said, Colonel, I said, let's go talk to the squadron commander. And luckily, the squadron commander lived on base. So we went and talked to him, who was a cool guy. I really liked Colonel Forstner, he's a smooth talker. So he calmed them down and convinced them that it was not a dangerous airplane. And hey, the cure is we don't do that maneuver.
But a caution warning, a note saying, don't do the following. Would solve it, yeah.
Yeah, so.
An overview of 105s in Vietnam. What would be I mean, was it
It was, okay.
So we're taking an airplane.
Here's my overview. It was the right airplane, is the best airplane for that mission. Now, people say, you lost so many. It could not be the good airplane for that mission, you lost so many. Well, when it did 75% of all the Air Force bombing up north, you know, losses is about exposure. If you put more airplanes out there, that's what's going to get shot down the most, you know. And not only put them out there, they sent them to the worst places in Vietnam. I mean, the 105s flew more missions, a disproportionate share of the tough missions over at North Vietnam. And that's why we lost so many.
And I remember reading Fed Ridge a long time ago. And apparently the attack was like the same way almost every day.
Same time, same flight route. We had, and that's the other thing too, is the rules of engagement were against you. You know, initially, the first time I deployed down there, the rule of engagement was...
What year would that be?
1964, late 64, November through December 64. Now, we weren't going into North Vietnam yet. At that time, we were just doing Laos. But the rule of engagement was you couldn't shoot unless you were shot. You had to wait till you were shot at first before you could shoot. Now, how do you fight a war that way, you know? Now, when we went into...
When you're past it, what are you going to shoot at?
Here's a story on that. In December of 64, when we were down there, we only got one hot mission because of that ground rule about you couldn't shoot unless you were shot at first.
Right.
This RF-101 pilot who had been in country months and months and knew the area like the back of his hand, and he was hot to trot to get in a fight. He wanted to fight. So, so good buddy by two.
What was he going to fight with?
Well, here's the way it goes. Two of my good buddies were escorting him, 105s, and he take him up there, and he kept on hinting to him. He says, "Okay," he says, "if you guys see anything, just call it out, and I'll confirm that you're getting shot at." You know, he would.
Oh, I get it.
He verbally, he was going to say whether he shot or not. You know, so he'd go out there. Hey, come on. Well, our guys were playing it honestly. They weren't getting shot at. So he finally says, "Okay," he says, "Hey, before you run out of fuel," he says, "I'm going to take you over one place." He says, "I'll guarantee you'll get some action there. So he goes and flies over Chapone, which was a bad place. A lot of guns there in Laos. He goes there, the two thugs follow him. And the quote that I've never forgotten was, "Let's go back and rattle our cage one more time," because nothing happened. Well, what happened is he probably overflew them at lunchtime, and the guys are out there with their little eating. So by the time they came around the second time, they were ready for him, and they bagged him. They got him. He ends up getting shot down, the 101 guy. So he gets shot down. My two buddies roll in on the guns and rockets and strafe, and then they stay down and for rest cap to get the guy out. Luckily, they got him out. Air America came in. It was a race between the bad guys and Air America. And the thing is, he's hung up in this tree, and he sees these bad guys in black pajamas headed this way. He sees an unmarked helicopter land over here. Guys in black pajamas head this way. He doesn't know which was who's coming to rescue him, you know.
I didn't know Air America had helicopters.
Oh yeah, they flew. Air America had helicopters, 123s, and the Pilatus Porter or something like that. Yeah. So anyway, out of desperation, he released himself from hung up in the tree, not realizing he was so high up that when he hit, he broke several bones in his legs and all that. Luckily, the guys coming out of the helicopter reached him before the other guys, and so he got saved by the CIA guys. And but anyway, so that was the only hot mission we got in '64. Then in '65, when we started going up there, now at least they were doing pre-planned missions. Now we could go out there and pre-plan.
And that's what your video is about. One of those missions.
Yeah,
one of those early
well,
SAM missions.
it was the very first SAM mission. What happened was Rolling Thunder, the air campaign over North.
You know they lost what, about 450 or so F-105s, and about this
395.
F-4 is about the same, I think. 400s. You know how many helicopters they lost?
Oh, geez, thousands.
5,000.
Yeah.
And I had no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, one of our docents was a Cobra pilot.
Yeah.
Good grief! I mean, he had so many pictures on this thumb drive, and most of them were crashed helicopters. Were back, all just shot all to hell.
Oh yeah. And I'll tell you, those Army guys, they had big brass ones, because if they picked anybody up, if they saved anybody, it was an automatic air medal. So man, if a pilot jumped out, they were doing anything to get themselves an air medal. They'd go in there and help get the guy out. A good buddy of mine got shot down and got rescued, and we got the word that the chopper that rescued him was going to come and drop him off there at our base. So we all went down to the flight line to meet him, and he gets out of the helicopter, and man, he's walking like he's got a pole up his rear end, just stiff, really hurt, you know. So I went up to him and I said, "Bob," I said, "what the heck happened?" And I'll never forget, he just shook his head. He says, "Vic," he says, "I can't believe I did it." And I said, "What's that?" He says, "I did exactly what I told you we should never do." He says, "I was on my third strafe pass when they got me." And here's the guy that when we were flying down there in a 135, we were deploying down there, he was lecturing me. He was senior to me, you know. He was lecturing me. He says, "Vic," he says, "remember this, he says, there isn't a target over Vietnam worth a 105 of your life." He says, "It's one pass and haul ass." That's his saying, one pass and haul ass. Well, they spotted a truck, which was a flak trap, and he got hit on his third pass.
Oh, wow.
I punched out over there.
No.
Yeah, okay, 105.
Oh, really?
Yeah, engine failure. I didn't get shot down, but when you have one engine and it quits,
Where did it happen?
Up over North Vietnam. The mission was, all the SAM sites, they originally established them around Hanoi.
Right.
And as the war progressed, they got more and more SAM sites. They started bringing them down, further down. And so they had 3 new suspected sites near the DMZ. Mm-hmm. So I was paired up with the Wild Weasel. And since it's near the DMZ, which is not a high threat area, it was just him and me. He was the hunter and I was the killer. So we went.
So he wanted 100 or 105?
No, 105.
Okay.
105 Weasel. So we were out there looking for these 3 new suspected sites, And what happened is, as we approached the first one, it was under an undercast, and you never want to hunt for SAMs under a cloud, because your best defense against them is to spot the launch.
See 'em, yeah.
Yeah, because it just so much dust, smoke, flame, and then you can spot them, and then you can just put them off a wing, and then you bring the nose down and force it down, and then pull up, and it just tumbles it. No, you know, you defeat the missile that way. So when it was under the undercast, the weasel says, "We'll skip this one. Let's go to the next place." So we went to the next suspected site. Nothing there. Headed towards the third suspected site, and on our way into the third suspected site, finally the EWO in the back started picking up some radar signals, but it wasn't SAM, it was a gun. So we got to the third spot, nothing there. So he says, "Okay, let's go see if the first one has cleared out." And we started to turn to go back, and as we started to turn, I got this hellacious compressor stall. And now, compressor stalls were very common in a 100. I mean, you wouldn't even write them up. It was 100, it'll do it, yeah. 105, if it compressor stalled, you knew you had problems. So what happened...
So what is it now? I've never had that happen.
A compressor stall is usually caused by you lose one of the compressor blades, and that thing's RPM is so high that when it fails, it wipes out all the other adjacent.
Gotcha.
Like that, and it disrupts the airflow, and now you got more thrust going out the nose and out the tail. You know, it's like a car backfiring. You know, like a
Well, I've heard people in a dogfight and seeing flames come out at the front of an F-100.
That's what a compressor stalls.
But was it caused by the engine failing, or is it just the fact they got some unusual attitude?
What it was is that the nose intake and the engine design were never a good match for a certain attitude. And if you got to a certain airspeed attitude, you're going to guarantee a compressor stall. But in that one, the engine wasn't failing. It was stalling because without a failure of any blades, the airflow was still getting disrupted because of the design. It was not a good match.
Right.
So it would just, all of a sudden, it would like, belch.
Right, yeah.
And like I say, at the 100, that was very common. I mean, it's a beautiful sight at night. It gets your attention. It gets your attention at night, you know. But on a 105, that's, you know, so anyway, make a long story short, at first I thought I was going to be able to nurse the airplane back to my base, but I wasn't, so I ended up having to jump out of it. And I spent a couple hours on the ground before they came in and got me. And
so were you in the north or south?
Now north. Oh yeah, up north.
Oh,
yeah,
boy.
yeah. So the joke of the
so what you have? So you had your .38 caliber pistol with you, and
in my survival.
What were you going to do with your .38 caliber pistol?
Probably, I had a good buddy of mine that was captured, and when he saw the bad guys coming, he pulled out his .38, pointed to them, and as he said at his interview, when my son interviewed him, he says, and then I saw all those guys, and I only had 6 bullets. Before I had to reload, he says, I figured I wasn't John Wayne, and I just let the pistol twirl around his head, and then just handed it to him. Yeah. So anyway, after a little while, I heard the airplanes back in the area, so I went out there, and they brought in a chopper, and they got me out. They dropped a tree penetrator, got me in there, and when I got in the chopper, I remember the first thing I did is I looked at my watch because I knew where I'd gone out, and I knew that Air Force rescue outfits were stationed at Nakhon Phanom in Thailand, and it was about 45 minutes away from there. So I thought, oh, in 45 minutes I'll be Nakhon Phanom. So sure enough, about 45 minutes later, the old chopper started to settle down, and I jumped out, and I got hit with this salt spray. Cameras flashing off. You've never seen my bug-eyed picture? Have you seen that? So anyway, what happened was, I've been thinking Air Force the whole time, and I actually got rescued by a Navy chopper. So the joke of the family is that was the most expensive Navy rescue because I had to give him my first and second born because both my sons went Navy Air.
So are they still in?
No, they one did 21 years, and the other one did 30. The one that did 30 retired as a Navy captain.
Oh boy, that's a classic, isn't it?
Now, when people see that, they said, "Man, you must have been scared." And I said, "No, I was just shocked to find myself on a ship." Because
how many missions did you fly much after that? Or?
that happened on my 55th mission, and that happened November 6th, and my TDY orders there were through November 19th. So I had, and it took a couple days to get to my base. So I probably got back to my base around either the 8th or 9th. So I probably had 10 days left to go. And what it was, the policy at that time was, if you jumped out and got rescued, you're considered an evadee, and they'd send you home. My buddy that I told you about that got shot down on the 3rd strafing past,
Right.
That happened 2 weeks before I jumped out,
Right.
and they'd send him home. So he's telling my wife in Japan, "Oh, Vic's gonna be coming home now. He's all finished down there since this happened." Well, next day after I finally make it to my base, here's my squadron commander, and he says, "Man, we're glad got you out and glad to have you back," and all that. He says, "When can I put you back on a schedule?" And just the look of my face must have said it all, because his next thing, he got a real surprised look, and he says, "You do want to fly again, don't you?" And I said, "Well, sir, I thought it was policy that as an evadee you get sent home." He goes, "Well," he says, "that's an unofficial policy." He says, "It's the needs of the Air Force." He says, and he says, "I'd sure like you to stay on." He says, "Because we need your experience. I'm shorter guys," and he said, "You know, I'd like you to stay on." Well, I didn't want to sound like I had a big yellow streak down my back, and say no. So I remember I said, "Well," I said, "Okay," I said, "but I don't have any equipment. It's all up in the jungle." He says, "Don't worry," he says, "I'll get you your equipment." The very next day I was on the schedule.
Oh wow.
So
What about when you guys got back from a mission? I guess you only flew one mission a day, generally speaking.
oh no, so there were some days you flew twice a day.
And
Not more often. It was one a day.
Yeah.
And it'd be, you fly one this day, next day off, then one, or then maybe 2 day off. So I'm trying to think. Let's see. I remember my second tour down there. I was there 49 days and got 29 missions in 49 days.
That's nice to get in and get out and get it over with.
Yeah. So yeah.
A friend of mine was a backseater, a Marine backseater in a force on the South.
Yeah.
He was there for about a year. He flew 430 missions.
Wow. That's,
Why did you do that? He said, I didn't want to go to the bar like everybody else did. I couldn't, 430? Are you kidding?
Yeah.
He was just a hop from one airplane to the other.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, weird.
I remember one time she wrote me. She says, "Hon," I says, "all the other wives think you're crazy because they asked me how you were doing, and I told them that you were just having a great time." Because I was telling her how it was so relatively easy compared to up north. The way I described it, flying missions up north is always anxiety. In the South, it was like being on a big tactical range. I mean, it was fun. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
It happened to me when I jumped up. Fighter pilots, well, it was about bomber pilots, but the pilots have a funny sense of humor. When I got back, when I jumped out and I got back, 2 guys, this one guy who had a real funny sense of humor, I had taken a portable typewriter down with me there, so I could write my wife. And the day I got back, the day I jumped out, another guy ended up crash landing his thud in Da Nang. He got hit right in the nose, and he couldn't get a gear down. And I'm surprised that he did that, because the Dash 1 says you don't try and crash land an airplane at 105. But he successfully did it. I think he's only two known times where guys have successfully crash landed. So anyway, he had brought down a stereo system. Well, this guy timed it like when this guy with a stereo system and me with a typewriter walked back into our hooch. There he was on his bed in his shorts with my portable typewriter on his lap, typing away, and the guy's earphones played. And he sees that, he goes, "Oh, you're back."
So what was it now? So when you go in as a flight of 4, typically, I mean later in the stages, you're basically going in sort of like single ship.
No, you seldom,
Well, you went in as a flight of 4, but then
you always go flight of 4. So you always want mutual support. The reason you don't go single ship is, first of all, if you get knocked down, shoot down, they don't know what happened here. You don't have nobody supporting you. So there were a few single ship missions flown for a short time. Ryan's Raiders. Have you ever heard of Ryan's Raiders? Okay, General Ryan was head of PACAF. And what's happening is the Navy was flying single ship A6s because they had a good bombing system.
Oh, yeah,
with that.
sure.
Yeah. So he got pissed off, and he thought the Navy was showing him up. And he says,
Oh, boy.
"Why don't we have something? Why can't we do that?" You know. Well, then he says, "The 105 is supposed to be an all-weather airplane, isn't it?" "Yes, sir." He says, "We're going to start flying night single ship missions with a 105." And so they modified. They took the two-seated 105s. They took a selected number of them and modified them, improving the resolution of the radar so they could get closer to the target. Because the error of probability with a standard radar was 400 feet. Well, 400 feet is not very good for a conventional weapon.
Right.
So I forget what they tried to get it down to. But anyway, they became Ryan's Raiders, and they flew a few of those missions, and they would fly single ship at night, and they started losing them right and left, and finally they convinced Orion that that was not a good mission.
So, but the typical attack, like if you're going to go into Hanoi, you flew with a flight of 4.
It'd be flights of 4.
Flights of 4. But then would you come in, would they break off and go in one at a time to hit the target? Or
What you do is, okay, you could come in 4 like this. If the flight lead or the guys weren't too smart, they would come in there. You'd all set for the target, about a mile.
Right.
Yeah. And you'd come in at 4,500 feet, and you'd pop up to about 13,000 feet, and it's like a fan, you know, and
Right.
like that. Smart guys approaching the target would split up, maybe 2 this way and 2 this way, and both pop up and kind of come in from all 4 different quadrants.
Right.
Now, it was a little riskier because of the opportunity for a mid-air collision that way.
Sure.
So you had to know what you're doing, you know. But that made it very harder for the gunners, you know, which one do I pick, you know? And as it was, most gunners were just shoot up barrage fire anyway. But anyway, that's what you do. You
So what would be the most typical target up around Hanoi?
Oh, Hanoi? Okay, I went up against Viet Tri, which is about 20 miles from Hanoi, to hit the railroad yards, or so it was a railroad yard. Then I went up against Yen Bay. There, it was just a lot of guns there. They wanted to take the guns out. But most of your targets were, the most popular target were bridges. You know,
Sure.
Glenwa Bridge,
Right.
the big bridges, you know. So bridges were primary. Airfields were off limits when I was there.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. But then once they opened them up, the airfields became a good target.
Okay, so the idea was you take your flight of 4 and you do a big
Fan.
pull it up and then come in as a flight of 4.
Well, staggered. But
No, but I mean, 4 guys were kind of in a dive at the same time.
staggered dive. You know, one guy when he's on his dive, number 2 is probably just rolling in.
Okay.
3 is on the pull up,
Gotcha.
and 4 is tailing Charlie here.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. And then when you come off, you pre-brief. We're going to come off the target. It was way up north. Usually it was a left turn because if you went right, you'd be headed for China. So, you know, it's like coming in, it's going to be a left turn out. So you release and see, your most experienced guy is the lead. Next most experienced guy is number 3.
Element lead.
Yeah, the element lead. He can take over the flight if lead aborts.
Sure, yeah.
And the wingmen are the less experienced guys, number 4 being the least experienced guy. Well, I flew a lot as number 2. my last tour down there, I had enough experience where they upgraded me to an element lead, so I was able to fly number 3. So I remember going up against a target where, as soon as I released, I still start pulling up. I spotted 2 up there, and there's lead over there. So covered. Now we don't join up close. We join up in a spread and head on out.
And let's stay low.
Surprisingly, you don't want to go below 4,500 feet, because before 4,500 feet, anybody with a slingshot can take a pot shot at you.
So what was your exit speed?
Oh, 500, 600. Yeah.
What was the maximum speed on the deck?
105?
Yeah.
810. And the limiting factor, when you talked about outside, we talked about the heat on the 812.
Yeah.
The limiting factor on 105, it was capable of more than 810, but at 810, the sealant around the canopy started melting because it would start getting hot. Now, I know guys that have had it quite a bit higher than 810 on the deck, getting away from MiGs. I think that the highest I ever heard was 870. But at about 840, the heat starts turning the canopy opaque also. Pretty soon you can't even see out of it. It just kind of like crystallizes and turns opaque.
Wow. I wonder how fast the MiG would go on the deck.
Below 17,000 feet, there was nothing that could touch a 105
Right.
Until the 111s came down. 111s can even go faster than 105 below that. And the and MiG-21s, see, originally the North Vietnamese Air Force was furnished with MiG-17s.
Right.
Well, a 105 could outrun a MiG-17s without even dumping its bombs. So if you spot a MiG-17 early enough, all you had to do is go burner and dump the nose, and you could outrun them. Mm-hmm. So early in the war, the Soviets saw that, and they said, oh, we need something faster. And that's when they started giving the Vietnamese MiG-21s. Mm-hmm. But MiG-21 couldn't keep up with a third on the deck. Now, you would have to clean the wings off to be able to outrun a MiG-21, mm-hmm. but you could outrun. And if you clean your wings off, he's done his job.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so
nothing left to do.
Yeah. Did
you ever do any strafing up in the NOAA, or it was just bombs?
Oh no, you don't want to strafe up north. There's, first of all, now I had buddies, and everybody did things. Surprisingly, it wasn't standardized. I was kind of naive, I guess. We trained and were taught 45-degree dive, release at 7,000 feet, release at 5,000 feet if it's not a heavily defended target. If it's a heavily defended target, release at 7,000 feet, 450 knots, everything's standard, like that. And that's what I do. I know a buddy of mine that used to come down at 60 degrees, and he liked being supersonic. He'd be in burner supersonic and do it. And he also did some strafing up there. Going to the target, they overflew a air base, and there was a gun at the edge of the air base firing at him, and it pissed him off. So he said, after we hit the target, I'm going to come back and shoot that guy. So he came back and he got up to 1.3 Mach, fairly low, not on deck, but fairly low, armed up the gun. I tell you, don't hold the gun more than 2 seconds or you burn the barrels. And he was going to try and fire out in one pass. And when he got there, he laid on that trigger, and next thing you know, there's a big explosion, and the airplane shook and all that. He lost the air turbine motor, the generator, everything, and he thought, I've been hit. Well, no, it was he blew the gun door out, too much gases because he laid on too long, And he called out, so-and-so's hit, and then he was embarrassed because he says, without doing anything, the air turbine motor started back up by itself, the generator came back on the line by itself and all that. So.
Now what
What you're about to see is a very accurate animation of Operation Spring High created by John McKay, a dear friend of mine. This is, like I say, an accurate animation that depicts the first anti-SAM strike in 27 July 1965. This is Colonel Vic Vizcarra, retired USAF, and John McKay is the CGI facilitator. He's the one that made the animation. The reason for the ship is he was a Navy type, and this mission was codenamed Operation Spring High. On 24 July 1965, the SAM war in Vietnam began with the first shoot-down of an Allied aircraft by a SAM, which was an F-4, Leopard 2. Leopard 2, or Leopard Flight, was our escort, mid-cap escort on that day. We were up on frequency with them, and we heard the shoot-down. In response to the first shoot-down, the Department of Defense reduced operations at least up near the Hanoi area, trying to determine what's the best way to handle and go against the SAMs. President Johnson finally authorized an all-out attack to hit all the SAM sites, which Secretary of Defense McNamara was opposed to. He feared that that would be a great expansion of the war. So the night of the 26th, we did the mission planning to hit all 7 known SAM sites simultaneously. At 5 o'clock in the morning, we had a mass briefing where we were briefed the weather, the tanker locations, the threat, and so on. And then we broke up into our individual flights. And soon after breaking up into our individual flights, somebody stuck their head in the briefing room and said, "Stand by, everything's on hold." It turns out that McNamara had finally gone back to Johnson and convinced them to reduce the attacks, to attack only the 2 newest SAM sites suspected of shooting down Leopard 2. So at the last minute, all the previous night's flight mission planning went up in smoke, and we had to replan the missions, and that delayed the mission until the afternoon. The tasking was for 6 flights, 105s, which would be 24 aircraft, and 6 flights from Tok Lee would hit the 2 newest SAM sites. The forces were all on temporary duty. The 563rd was stationed from McConnell Air Force Base. That was the stateside unit. And along with the 563rd was the 80th Squadron, which was my squadron, stationed there at TDY from Japan. This was my squadron, Rambler flight. I was Rambler 2 in aircraft 301. Again, a very accurate animation of what actually occurred there. The first 3 flights, which were the ones from the 563rd, were tasked to strike the actual SAM Site 7. And then the next 3 flights, my flight being among them, were to strike the support facility about half a mile from the actual SAMs. If you'll notice in this view here, as the aircraft taxi in for the last check arming area, one of the aircraft is painted differently than the other one. What happened was the 563rd had 1 ground abort, so at the last minute, one of our airplanes from the 80th had to join them as number 4. In the arming area, maintenance crews would make one last inspection of the aircraft, along with the munitions crews who would remove the safety pins from the munitions. The Catholic chaplain made a habit of always seeing the aircraft off in the arming area, as hot as it was there. And here is you have the very first flight, pepper flight, getting clearance onto the runway. The flights were scheduled with 2.5 minutes spacing between flights. Here you see the pepper flight was loaded with 4 napalm cans, 2 in the center line, and then 1 on each outboard position. Half of the flights had napalm, and the other half had CBU-2s, which were little bomblets that were good for soft targets such as SAMs. Again, a very accurate depiction here of the hump in the runway at Carrico. Eyelids until the AB partially open, the speed brakes partially open for the AB. 10-second spacing on each aircraft takeoff. A good view of the 2 napalm cans in the center line. Aircraft would accelerate out to 300 knots for the join up. And the target was approximately 450 miles one way, which required mid-air refueling, which is what you'll see in the next view. We had assigned tankers that orbited at the Thai-Laotian border. The receptacle door for the refueling is up there in the nose. And I believe this is going to be, let me think of the call sign, but anyway, on this formation, number 3 had an air turbine motor failure, which is a major component of the aircraft. You can see the master caution light come on, and so Cedar 3 has to air abort. And because of the importance of the mission, he tells his wingman to continue on with the mission and that he would take the airplane back to Talkley himself. So because of that abort, plus a ground abort by Willow flight, only 22 105s instead of 24 proceeded on to SAM Site 6. The plan called for the Carrico to attack SAM Site 6 from the south, while simultaneously the Carrico flights would proceed up to the Red River and then head down from the northwest towards SAM Site 7. Both SAM sites were within 3 miles of each other, and as you can see, there was a potential for mid-air collision because of the close proximity. This was handled by briefing that the flights coming down from the northwest, as soon as they released, they were to do a hard brake right turn away from SAM Site 6 to not overfly their flight path. That's my aircraft, 301. We spotted this beautiful waterfall in Laos that even Rambler 4 in my flight broke radio silence to comment on its beauty. I always searched for that waterfall anytime I was in the area again, never found it after that. We had a RB-66 providing us real-time status of the SAMs with a code name of Bluebells Are Singing, which meant that the SAMs were up and operating, or Bluebells Are Silent if they were off. And during our ingress to the target, after leaving the tanker all the way to the target, that call sign, Bluebells Are Singing or Bluebells Are Silent, were alternating back and forth as the Vietnamese would turn their radars on and off. This is a very accurate depiction. This looks like the day I flew the mission. We popped over this ridge. We're headed for the Red River, just south of Yen Bay, which was known for having a lot of guns. And the plan was to approach there at 100 feet, but the flak was so heavy and bursting above us that it forced the flights down to even lower than 100 feet. Most flights went down to 50 feet. My flight lead went down to about 20 feet. We were so low, we were kicking up rooster tails over the rice paddies. The next scene you're going to see, don't know if it really happened or not, but my animator thought it would be a little humorous to put it in there. So you'll see an effect on some of the natives in the rice paddies. It was a 50-foot dash, 100-foot, or excuse me, for 50 miles. And here these little Vietnamese spot the airplanes coming. They're warning the soldier. Here they come, here they come. And he gets drenched. I'd like to kind of think that maybe something like that happened. There I am again, aircraft 301, start our descent. Take note that I am Rambler 2. As we're starting our descent, Healy 2, which was in the lead flight, calls that he's been hit. Healy 1 urges him to stay with the aircraft as long as he can, saying, "You got to get over the next ridge. Stay with it. Head over for the next ridge." We're hearing this all on the radio. And then finally we hear the sickening sound of a parachuting beeper. Unfortunately, Healy 1 lands in the Red River itself, and Healy 1 heroically orbits over him, still right near the target, and he sends Healy 3 and 4 to the tanker, and Healy 1 orbits over the down Healy 2, who unfortunately is never seen again and is presumed to have drowned in the river. The next flight was Austin flight, and they were armed with the CBU-2s, which you see here. There's thousands of bomblets that come out, and they are a good area coverage weapon. And as I mentioned before, the flights were about 2.5 minutes spacing between flights. So after Austin comes Hudson flight. Again for a 50-foot release. But Hudson 2 gets hit, and Hudson 3 is yelling for him to eject, to get out, get out. Hudson 2 crashes with no parachute observed, so it's doubtful that he got out. Then Valiant flight is the next flight, and it's the flight that's preceding our flight, and it is supposed to be the first flight to hit the support facilities. Unfortunately, because of the low altitude approach, spotting the target was very difficult, and when he spotted the target, it turns out it was lined up with the SAM site itself. So they dropped on the SAM site rather than the support facility. And Valiant 4 was so frustrated that he fired his gun in desperation, just tried to hope to hit something. This is my flight, Rambler flight. I'm the aircraft on the right, approaching the turn at the river. I knew it was going to be a 120-degree heading change, which means that I had to give him room to turn into me. So I started to try to lag the flight, but unfortunately didn't lag it enough, and the turn got so steep that the bank blanked out the flight, so I had to hopefully rely that Lee didn't fly into me. We rolled out on a heading slowly and found out we were in great shape. But then lead, Rambler 1, you can see he got right down below the deck by about 20 feet. And he actually had to climb up to 50 feet, rock his wings to rock us into wingtip to drop. That's the way we were tasked to drop. And so we dropped 16 cans of napalm on his command against the barracks. As soon as we released, he said, "Vic, you got the lead." So I broke hard to the right and so there I am, lead the flight out of the area and trying to avoid SAM Site 6. Corvette flight was the last flight to hit SAM Site 7. They approached the target so fast, they were doing 600 knots, that as they got near the target, they actually had to extend their speed brakes to slow down for a 500 knot release. And I remember specifically, there was an anonymous transmission saying, "Let's get the hell out of here," followed by seconds of heavy breathing. Evidently, either the mic button got stuck in the open position, or the pilot was so excited he kept his finger pressed on her. But anyway, it was comforting to know that I wasn't the only one breathing hard. Next was the flights from Carrico attacking SAM Site 6. For some reason, their spacing wasn't as close or as tight together as ours was. When we hit SAM Site 7, the site was under continuous attack every 2.5 minutes for 6 flights. The Carrico bunch had much more spacing between their flights. This is Cedar flight. That was only a 3-ship because you remember one aborted on the tanker. Cedar 2 got hit just as they approached the target, but still managed to release his weapons before crashing. In the heat of battle, things happened so fast. Again, similar to Hudson flight, he was not observed to bail out, so we did not know his status. Dogwood flight was the last flight going in, and their tasking was as cleanup flight. They were supposed to attack anything that had survived previous attacks. As they were approaching SAM Site 6, lead called out, they salvoed because everything opened up all of a sudden, so they had to brake to avoid the gunfire, and Dogwood 2 took a hit and called out that he had a fire light. Dogwood 3 is excitedly telling 2 to bail out, that he's got flames trailing. Lead tells him, "You better clean the wing off." Meanwhile, 2 is saying, "I'm sticking with it as long as it's flying. I'm trying to make it to the next ridge." Here, 3 is saying, "Get out, get out." And he's saying, I'm going, because he finally lost control of the aircraft. Dogwood 2 landed in the top of a knoll and with a lot of vegetation, which at least allowed him to avoid being, by concealing himself from busloads of Vietnamese searching for him. Two Navy A-1 rescue aircraft, canasta flight, located him and made contact with him and went out and got a Jolly Green and escorted him back for a rescue, which happened to be the first Jolly Green rescue of the whole war. The Jolly Green had just arrived in theater. And there's my flight returning to base. It was a 2-hour and 35-minute mission. This is probably the only part of the animation that's not too accurate. He's got us all too close together. If you remove the two aircraft in the middle, it would be a more accurate depiction of the spacing between flights. Unfortunately, in trying to get this done for the 50th anniversary of the mission, I didn't even bring this up to try and correct it. And I'm going to summarize the results of the mission. "48 105s were tasked for the mission. Because of one ground abort and one air abort, only 46 made it all the way to the target. But meanwhile, 2 days before the mission, the Vietnamese had removed the SAM sites from the site, anticipating that the U.S. would retaliate for the first SAM shootdown, and they brought in an additional 130 guns and established the site as a flak trap. Of the 46 airplanes, we lost 6. First was Healy 2, and then Pepper 2, which was the lead flight out of Carrico and hitting SAM Site 6, got hit, but it was able to manage to fly away from the area. He was being escorted by lead, trying to make an emergency landing back at Udon in Thailand. Unfortunately, before reaching the base, the aircraft received an uncommand rollover, and they collided midair, killing both pilots.
Oh, right.
The 2 pilots that were shot down with no shoot observed turned out that they had bailed out successfully and ejected successfully and were captured, and both were released after close to 7.5 years of being a prisoner of war. Frank Tulu, Dogwood 2, the one that did get rescued, was the only successful rescue of the mission, and it was his first day as a captain. And these were all the flight members that participated in the mission. And notice Chuck Hosmer, who was the commander of when we went up against Iran the first time, flew that mission as a captain.
You mean Iraq?
Iraq, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. Captain Violet, Russ Violet, made general. Lou Pazel flew as a spare, did not even know who he was flying with, nor the number 2 who got shot down. Rambler, my flight. All 4 of those pilots have flown west since this was made.
So, what were the any lessons learned from this?
Definitely. There was the most prominent lesson was you don't attack SAMs at low altitude like that. Everybody and his brother can shoot at you. So you're better off going in at least at 4,500 feet and pop up and go against them. The more important lessons learned, this mission was such a disaster that the Pentagon created an anti-SAM task force in the Pentagon whose objective was to come up with lessons learned and solutions to the challenge of how to operate in a SAM environment. 47 recommended solutions were offered, came out of this task force. All 47 were adopted by the Air Force. Again, because of the criticality of timing, one of the first things the task force did was they did away with the mil-spec bureaucracy of the military and adapted best business practices. And to show you what can be done when that happens, within 4 months of this raid, the radar warning receivers were being installed in the aircraft within 4 months of the raid. The contract for that piece of equipment was a Polaroid photograph taken of a blackboard that had written out the specs of what was going to be designed and what the performance of the radar warning receiver would be, signed by the GE company representative and signed by the program office manager. That's what can be done when you get rid of these bureaucratic procedures. Another result was the development of the Wild Weasel aircraft. That was a direct result of this. The expediting the development of the Shrike missile, which was already in development, but more money was thrown at it, so it would be brought into production a lot quicker. And the jamming pods came out of this, and change in tactics, and the sand brake was developed. Turns out that Intel had a tendency to create the Russians as 10 feet tall when they're actually only about 6'7". And what we did, they gave the SAM much more capability than it really had. And it turned out that you could actually defeat the SAM with a 4G pull. And the tendency was to use more than 4Gs, and you would defeat the first SAM, but they were never fired in singles. They were always fired at least in pairs. So you'd defeat the first SAM, but they wouldn't have enough energy to defeat the second one. So as a result of these 47 solutions that the task force came up with, the SAM effectiveness was drastically reduced from 5.9% effectiveness in 1965 to 1.2 by the end of the war. So it turns out that the SA-2s in Vietnam really weren't that effective, but they were effective in that they did force you down into the lower altitude where the AAA. 83% of all 105s lost in combat were shot down by AAA.
So I just asked the question, I noticed in the video that the damage to the airplane seemed to be from above.
That is correct. Howard Plunkett, an F-105 maintenance officer turned historian, has the largest database of airframes and 105 pilots. He was able to acquire, after the war, acquire a North Vietnamese report of this occurrence, of this mission. And it was written by the Russian advisors. And in it, one of the things that stood out was they made the statement they had never seen U.S. aircraft attack at that low altitude before in their life. They were so low that some of the guns, they couldn't be lowered low enough because the barrel was hitting the protective brim around there. So between attacks, the guys were out there with picking shovels, digging away at the brim so they could lower the gun all the way down to be able to hit him. So it was an interesting aspect.
And so, thank you very much. I think that's enough.
You're welcome.
Good stuff. Good stuff.